Good evening. Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be doing this kind of stuff. I don't get nearly as many opportunities as I would like. So we're going to speak this evening about Shakespearean comedies, what it is, what it isn't, what succeeds in production, what does not, in my estimation, succeed in production. I intend to touch on a number of plays during the course of this little chat. Now, some of them will be very familiar to you, some perhaps not. If you find that you're kind of losing the thread, if I'm kind of leaving you behind because I'm talking about a play you simply don't know at all, we're a small group, we can afford to be casual here. Just put a hand up and let me know, and I'll provide some context. Yeah, I can do a little plot summary to bring you up to the part of the play that I'm talking about. So, I would like to begin with an anecdote, okay, real life stories. This actually happened to me. We're going back many years, and I was hired to be part of the acting company of a national tour, Shakespearean touring company, and we were going to go out on the road with 3 plays. We were going to be doing Othello, the Comedy of Errors, and the Merchant of Venice. That's a good lineup. I mean, come on. You got one of the great tragedies in the history of the world. You've got one of Shakespeare's lighter confections, I think, the Comedy of Errors. And then you got this play in the middle ground there, The Merchant of Venice, which is a comedy. The Merchant of Venice is a comedy. It's a perilous play. It's a minefield. And a lot of theater companies would just as soon not wander in there. I love it. I love it, and I think I know how to do it without setting off the mines, but that's not the story I want to tell. So here's what happened. This was going to be my second go-round with The Merchant of Venice. A couple of years earlier, I had played the role of Bassanio. It was my first featured role in a Shakespearean play, and I had a great time. Bassanio's a great role. It's a great role. He's the young male lover in the play. And he's got some wonderful stuff to do. He's got this interesting relationship with Antonio. He has that lovely monologue where he's deciding which of the 3 caskets he should choose, gold, silver, or lead, because if you choose the right one, you get to marry Portia. And Bassanio gets the girl. So, I mean, I have nothing bad to say about that role. It was a lovely experience. But the more that I worked on the play, and the more that I read the play, and the more that I read about the play, the more certain I became that Antonio was where the action was in that play. I mean, Shylock, he's a supporting character. He's flashy, and a lot of great actors have taken on that role, but Antonio is the Merchant of Venice, after all. The play's not called, Shylock. The play's called The Merchant of Venice. That's Antonio. So when I was hired to be part of this company, I lobbied very aggressively to play that part. And they finally got tired of listening and said, okay, you can do it. One of the reasons that I was intrigued by the role of Antonio has very much to do with the beginning of the play. Antonio speaks what I think is one of the most curious opening lines of any comedy anybody ever wrote. Anybody off the top of their head know the first line of The Merchant of Venice? No penalty if you don't. It's a pop quiz, extra credit. The first words that the audience hears at The Merchant of Venice, unless the director is messing around with the order of scenes, which, don't do that. The first thing that the audience hears is Antonio, and he says, in sooth, I know not why I am so sad. That's a strange way to enter the world of a comedy. In sooth, I know not why I am so sad. Now, he's out on stage there are 2 other characters supposedly with him at that point. There's Solanio and Salerio. I hate to say it, but these guys are kind of interchangeable. A lot of productions, including ours, combine them into one role. But it's important that Antonio is actually speaking to somebody. In sooth, I know not why I am so sad. It wearies me. You say it wearies you. Blah, blah, blah. Okay. Now, as we go through the play, I think we get more than enough information for the actor of Antonio to ground that first line. You know, I think we come to understand what it is that's making him sad. Okay. Let me fast forward through the play a little bit. Bassanio, Antonio's young friend, I mean, he's kind of a what's the word, a wastrel? You know, he's a little profligate. Antonio has loaned him money in the past and has not gotten repaid. But Bassanio wants another loan because this woman, Portia, who lives in Belmont, the play, of course, takes place in Venice. Portia's in Belmont, and she's on the market, basically. And guys are coming to Belmont to woo her. But her father, who is deceased, has set up this little, shell game, right? Her picture lives in one of these three caskets: gold, silver, lead. And the guy who picks the right one gets to marry Portia. Well, Portia's great. She's great. She's a great, she's a great character. She's kind of the soul of the play. Bassanio wants to go and make himself a candidate for Portia's hand. He comes to Antonio and he says, "Look, I need some money. I gotta buy outfits and stuff. I mean, I gotta make a good impression. Can you help me out?" And Antonio says, "Look, I have a cash flow problem. I don't have anything to loan you, but my credit is good out there on the Rialto, the business district in Venice." So Antonio says to Bassanio, "Go find out who will loan me money." Enter Shylock, the Jewish moneylender, who does not like Antonio particularly well, or any of the Christians in the play for that matter. And he may have, good reason for his animosity. Antonio, in this deal brokered by Bassanio, he says to Shylock, I need to borrow 3,000 ducats. And Shylock says, "Fine, I'll loan you the money." And just to show that we're all friends here, Shylock says, "If you don't repay me by, a date that we will write in the contract, I won't charge you interest. I'll just, I'll just take a pound of your flesh." How about that? "From whatever part of your body pleaseth me." That's what he says. And Bassanio is, he's flabbergasted by this. He says to Antonio, "Don't sign that." Antonio says, "Don't worry about it. My merchant vessels are on their way to port even as we speak. I'm going to be a wealthy guy again. The money's going to be rolling in again well before the due date here, so it's fine." Signs the contract. Okay, we know what happens. Antonio gets word that his ships are lost at sea. He defaults on the contract. Shylock takes him to court. He's got the contract. He's got a very sharp knife, and he's got scales to weigh out a pound of flesh. Through some contrivance, the kind of a thing that in a Shakespearean comedy you don't spend a lot of time inquiring into, Portia shows up at the court, and she's in disguise as a man, and we know that these disguises are foolproof in Shakespeare, right? We know that because nobody ever says, "Hey, that's not a man, that's a woman," right? It kills me. It kills me when people who are women playing men in Shakespeare, and they talk like this. You don't have to. Your disguise is perfect. And we know that because nobody says, "Hey, that's really Portia." Okay. So Portia gets herself appointed to be the judge in this case, right? Young legal scholar. Okay, everyone's cool with that. That's where she has the great quality of mercy speech, right? Shylock's at the point of death. I mean, really. Now Portia's in charge of the case, so he's really not in any real danger, but it's close. It's a close call. And she says to Shylock, "Dude, you're a businessman. We're offering you 3 times what was promised you in the contract. Take the money." Nope. "I will have my bond," he says. This is his day. Every dog has his day. This is Shylock's day. He's not, he wants the pound of flesh. So Portia springs the trap on him, right? She gave him every chance to do it the right way, and he won't. So she says, "Okay, start cutting. You get a pound of flesh. But if you spill 1 drop of blood, because there's no blood in this contract, you spill a drop of blood, then it's on you. You're subject to all of these horrible penalties. Okay. So Antonio is rescued at the 11th hour. Flash forward to Act 5. Now we're winding things down. And because it's a Shakespearean comedy, we know that loose ends are going to be tied up. People who were sundered are going to be reunited. All that good stuff. I mean, these two couples, we've got Bassanio and Portia, and we've got Gratiano, who's Bassanio's pal, and Nerissa, who is Portia's handmaiden. They're also married. So we have two marriage couples at Belmont in Act 5, along with Antonio. And it's all revealed that it was actually Portia who was the judge in the case, and there's lots of funny stuff going on. Everyone's laughing. These two couples are married, but they never had a chance to have a wedding night. So there's a little sexual tension in the environment as well. They're kind of anxious to, that's been deferred. As part of this conversation, Portia says, oh, by the way, Antonio, here's a letter that you might want to read. And Antonio reads the letter, and Portia says, it indicates that the earlier reports of your ships being lost at sea, they were kind of wrong. Your ships have come to port. You're a wealthy guy once again. And Antonio, as you might understand, is gobsmacked by this information. And so he's there with the letter, and then the play ends. The play ends with Gratiano, who's kind of a rough character. He's pretty rude. He's pretty crass. And he ends the line with what is overtly, sexual kind of a pun, which, Shakespeare loved those. Yeah? So the two wedded couples exit into the house. But what does Antonio do? See, this is what I was thinking about. What does Antonio do? Does he follow them? Right? Does he go into the house with them? To do what? Right? Sit in the parlor? Pretend he doesn't hear, the... So I had an idea, and I spoke to my director about it, and he was a hard sell, but I'm pretty persuasive when I put my mind to it. And I convinced him to do something at the end of the play, and this is what I engineered. We engineered. At the end of the play, amidst much laughter and mirth and some good-natured groping, the two married couples went off into the house. And as that was happening, the lights started to come down, music started to come up, and I was out there with Solanio or Solario or Solanario, whatever we were calling this guy. And while all this is happening, while we are clearly signaling the play is ending, he and I sort of maneuvered ourselves back to the same positions that we occupied at the beginning of the play, and the last thing the audience would hear, just before the lights went to black, is, in sooth, I know not why I am so sad. The full circle thing. And, okay, here we are, final dress rehearsal. And by the way, we had total buy-in on this. The director liked it, the whole cast liked it. It made sense to me. Final dress rehearsal. Our touring company was based out of New York City, but we were rehearsing the plays it was on the campus of Dickinson College in Carlisle, Pennsylvania. They have a lovely theater. So our producer came down from New York to watch our final dress rehearsal. And we're playing the show, and it's going well, because we've been rehearsing for weeks. We're solid. And we get to the end. And the married couples go into the house, and you can hear their laughter trailing off. Lights start to come down. Music starts to come up. Solanio and I start making that last move. And from the darkened theater, we hear the voice of the producer. And she's saying, no, no, no. What is that? No, what are you doing? No, 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 no. It's a comedy. It has a happy ending. And my rhetorical question to you is, was she right? And the answer is yes and no. That's what I want to talk about. Now, that was a long way of getting into this, but that was a formative experience for me. That whole thing kind of solidified for me not only what is available in Shakespearean comedy, but beyond that, I think what is intended by the author of these plays. And I hope to demonstrate this with some specific examples. I'll see Shakespeare wherever I find it. I have seen, countless, hundreds, if not thousands of productions. And what I find is that the comedies, they leave me cold more often than not. And here's why. You know that editors of Shakespearean text divide his plays into 5 acts. Shakespeare didn't do that. That came later. Okay. In my experience, when I watch productions of Shakespearean comedies, I generally find that they get pretty well dialed in Acts 2, 3, and 4. That's not problematic. That's where the funny stuff's happening. Acts 1 and 5 tend to be very, very difficult. So I want to start by talking about the beginnings of plays. When we talk about classical comedy, we talk about the storm, which can be literal, as it is in The Tempest, as it is in The Comedy of Errors, as it is in Twelfth Night. We can actually be talking about a storm, or it is an action or a sequence of actions that catapult the protagonists out into the greater world of the play, which is where the funny stuff happens. Let's use as an example A Midsummer Night's Dream. One of the great comedies. But let's drill down a little bit into the opening scene of the play. In the first scene of the play, we meet Theseus and Hippolyta. Now, they've got issues, but that's brief. Our introduction to them is brief. Here comes Aegeus. I get these guys mixed up every single time. Midsummer is, it's Aegean. Aegean, see, I did it again. Aegean comes before Theseus, the Duke of Athens, with his daughter Hermia. And he says, Duke, I got a problem with this one. I say she has to marry this guy, Demetrius. She says she wants to marry that guy, Lysander. I claim the ancient privilege of Athens, is what Aegean says. The ancient privilege of Athens, which is that I can bestow my daughter on whom I please. And if she doesn't do it the way I want it done, she has 2 choices: death, or she can go into a convent and never again be in the company of men. And Theseus says to Hermia, he's right. That's the law. So watch what you do next. Right? Now call me crazy. I don't think that's funny. I mean, this father is so wrapped up in his idea of what she needs to do that he is willing to invoke a death penalty against her. It's serious. These are the stakes of the play. And actors and directors know that the stakes in a comedy are no less vital than they are in a drama or a comedy or a tragedy. Why is it important? It's important because this is the event that's going to persuade Hermia and Lysander to run off into the woods. That's where the comedy is lurking. The comedy's in the woods, because that's where Puck hangs out. That's where Oberon hangs out, and Titania, and the fairies, and the rude mechanicals. They're funny, right? But you gotta wait for it. You gotta wait until circumstances, real circumstances, force the people out into that world. I've seen some productions where the problem is that I think a lot of directors, and I hope I'm not treading on any toes here, I'm one myself. A lot of directors approach Shakespearean comedy with the mindset that everything is intended to be funny. And as a result, you get all kinds of force-fit stuff going on. Let me give you an example. I saw a production of A Midsummer Night's Dream where when Aegeon came before Theseus, he said, "I claim the ancient privilege of Athens," and he handed Theseus a scroll. Presumably, this was the text of the ancient law of Athens. And Theseus, very somberly, he took off the ribbon, and he opened the scroll, and he began to read, and then he did this. Oh. You see that? See, that's a comic trope. That's a comic trope. It was probably ancient already when the Three Stooges used it, in 1934. If you show that to an audience, you'll get a chuckle because the audience says, "Oh, that's a comic thing. I know that, so I'm supposed to laugh at it." But what have you done? What have you done? In quest of your short-term return, you've now made Theseus the Duke, and by the way, the co-founder of the greatest civilization on the face of the earth up to that point. You've made him an idiot. Later in the play, this is the guy who's going to say the lunatic, the lover, and the poet are of imagination all compact. I'm sorry, you can't have it both ways. But this is what we get. Let me give you another example. I've talked about Aegeon. Now let me move to the Comedy of Errors, which you've already heard me refer to as light. Well, it kind of is. I think it's kind of a confection, as among Shakespeare's more complicated and, more deeply satisfying later comedies. But note the beginning of the play. Again, curious first line. Old man is marched on stage, attended by officers, maybe even shackled. And the Duke of, we're in Ephesus, and the Duke of Ephesus, whose name is Solinus, is there, and the first thing that we hear in the play, the old man says, "Proceed, Solinus, to procure my fall, and by the doom of death, and woes and all." The Duke says, "Yeah, sorry, old man, I can't help you. I can't help you because you know that you come from Syracuse, we're in Ephesus, there is mutual kind of hatred going on right now between our two societies, and if any Syracusan be taken in Ephesus, as you have been, you will either pay a ransom of 1,000 marks or, here we go again, death penalty." And the Duke says, "I can tell by looking at you, you haven't gotten 1,000 marks, so you're in a bad way." But because it's the first scene of the play and the audience needs some exposition, he says, "Tell us, Aegeus, how you happen to be in this situation." And Aegeus is going to tell this long story. It's a long story, but it's necessary information for the audience. And it's an old story. Shakespeare didn't make this plot up. He didn't make up many of his plots. This one he borrowed from an old Roman play called The Twin Menechmi, right, by Plautus. So Aegeus tells the story about how he's a merchant. He travels the seas. He and his wife were in Epidamnum. She gave birth to twins. And they named them both Antipholus. Don't ask me why. I don't know how that works. The same night in the same inn, a peasant woman gave birth to twins. And Aegeus basically adopted them, promising, I suppose, to give them a better life than they would otherwise have. And he was going to raise them to be servants to his sons. So 2 Antipholuses and 2 Dromios. Okay. They're still infants when, according to Aegeus, his wife got homesick for Syracuse. So they put everybody on a boat, they're sailing home, and guess what? Shipwreck time. Shipwreck time. Boat hits a rock, splits in the middle. So here's on one side, here's Aegeus with one Antipholus and one Dromio, and they're eventually going to end up back in Syracuse. On the other side, here's Mrs. Aegeus with one Antipholus and one Dromio, and heaven only knows what became of them. The old man goes on in his story. I mean, it's already pretty bad, right? It's already kind of a tale of woe. But he goes on to say, when the son that was with me, the Antipholus that was with me, turned 18, he started to wonder about his brother, and he wanted to go out looking for him. And he took his servant with him. So imagine where Aegeus is now. He's back in Syracuse, but he's got no family. All 4 of his kids, whether biological or adopted, are gone. He has no idea of his wife's whereabouts. I mean, presumed dead, I suppose. So he says to the Duke of Ephesus, for the last 5 years, I've been looking for my boys. And I looked every place but here. So even knowing the danger, I had to come to Ephesus to take a shot, And basically, Duke, if we get to the end of the day and I can't pay the ransom, which I can't, you'll be doing me a favor by invoking this penalty. Again, call me crazy. I don't think it's funny. I don't think it's funny. It's the setup. It's the setup because unbeknownst to everybody, all 4 of the kids are now in Ephesus. Both of the Antipholuses and both of the Dromios are all right there, and here comes the mistaken identity comedy, right? But you gotta wait. You gotta wait a few minutes to get to it. But directors are impatient, or they think that audiences won't sit still for the buildup. So here are a couple things that I've seen done in this play. I saw one production where the Duke, Silenus, the actor gave him a speech impediment. I mean, he was like the Ephesus version of Elmer Fudd. I don't know what, right? So I guess it was funny just that he was talking like that. I saw one, how's this for a misbegotten choice? I saw one where during Aegeus' speech, all the townspeople, because this is a public event, all the townspeople fell asleep. What are you thinking? Why would you signal to the audience, this guy is boring, and if you listen to him, you'll pass out? I saw one recently. This play is infamous. I saw one recently where when the Duke said, okay, Aegeus, tell us the story of your, how you came to be here and under this harsh penalty. He pulled out a scroll as though he was going to read his life story, and he untied the ribbon and the thing went boom, right? It was like 20 feet long. And at one point he was reading his scroll and he started to, be a little flummoxed, and somebody came and took it away from him and they read the rest of his speech. Manufacturing laughs. Manufacturing cheap laughs, but not taking the long view. Problematic. These are the stakes. Let me breeze through a couple of others. I've talked about these plays thus far in some detail. It happens again and again and again. As you like it. We've got Duke Frederick usurping Duke Senior. Duke Senior has run off with his men into the forest of Arden. But Senior's daughter, Rosalind, is allowed to stay behind. Why? Because Frederick's daughter, Celia, and Rosalind, her cousin, they're BFFs. So initially, Frederick doesn't want to send Rosalind away because that won't go down well with his daughter, Celia. But after a certain point, he's had enough. And he comes out and he says to Rosalind, you're banished. You're banished. And if you're still here 24 hours from now, say it with me, Death penalty. Call me crazy. Don't think it's funny. That's why Rosalind has to dress up as a man and head off into the forest of Arden, with Celia and Touchstone. And if you read the scene where they're hatching their plot, they even know how much peril they're putting themselves in. But the forest of Arden is magical. Everybody who enters it is transformed somehow, right? You just gotta be patient. Be patient. Let the stakes be the stakes. Also, as you like it. We meet Orlando. In fact, he has the first line in the play. As I remember, Adam, right? And Orlando is being terribly mistreated by his older brother, Oliver. Their father has recently passed away, and Oliver is not allowing Orlando to have any of his inheritance, right? I mean, Orlando, he's an ambitious young man. He wants to make his way in the world. So there's a conflict there. It's all part of the stakes of the play. 12th night, actual storm, separating the twins, Viola and Sebastian. They both wash up on the beach, and they both presume the other one is drowned. Call me crazy. It's just on and on and on. It's like, why can't we let the stuff that's not funny, and my opinion, your mileage may vary, not intended to be funny. That will come. Who did I miss? Helena, all's well that ends well, right? King of France is on his deathbed, and the great healer in this society, Helena's father, he's passed away. King has lost all hope, and Helena says, let me try. My father taught me a lot of tricks. Let me try. And she cures him. It's a miracle. She heals him. I've seen productions where, I can't even describe for you, like the kind of stuff the king was doing. It was like your worst nightmare of Commedia dell'arte old guy, right? And then Helena, cures him, and he gets out there and does a little, does a soft shoe or something. This is not funny. It's not funny. It has to be a miracle. She performs a miracle, which is why he says to her, what do you want? Name it, it's yours. And she says, I want that guy, Bertram. That's what I want. And the king says, Bertram, get yourself ready. You're marrying this woman. And Bertram, who unfortunately has allied himself with this wacky character named Perloff, who's a great example of the braggart soldier in Shakespeare, the guy who's like all talk and when it comes right down to it, kind of cowardly. He persuades Bertram to run away. Here we go again. Somebody gets cannonballed out into the world of the play. Helena goes in search of him. There we go. Merchant of Venice. Okay, and I talked about Merchant of Venice at length. Any questions or observations about what I've talked about the beginnings of plays? Bottom line is that, look, I've always felt when I direct comedy, I always find that the better the script, and there are no better scripts than these, the better the script, the easier the process of finding what's funny. It should be right there for you. So what I like to do is, let that be what it is, and I want to go looking for the things that are not that. And they are plentiful in Shakespeare. Let's let the romantic elements play. Let's let the serious elements play. The comedy will come. Okay, so that's a look at some of our Act 1 issues. Now let's fast forward through Acts 2, 3, and 4, which generally succeed because that's the comedy. Let's get to Act 5. Now, I told you about my experience of Antonio in The Merchant of Venice. The phenomenon that I encountered for the first time, and look, this is not original with me. I honestly believe there is nothing new under the Shakespearean sun. I didn't make this up, but that was my first, visceral experience of it. At the ends of Shakespearean comedies, They're very, now, are they happy endings? Well, yes, they're happy endings, but in most of Shakespeare's comedies, and this is not across the board, there are a couple of plays that you could name, and I wouldn't argue the point, they don't conform. In most of Shakespeare's comedies, there is somebody at the end of the play who didn't quite get invited to the party. It's what I call the odd man out, the unaccommodated man. In Merchant, it's Antonio. Although, look, if you wanted to take Antonio off into the house with the marriage couples, okay, you can do that. You can do it. I don't find it satisfying, but you could do it. Because Shakespeare doesn't shine a light on Antonio's otherness at the end of the play. Let's look at some other examples. If you know Much Ado About Nothing, Much Ado About Nothing is virtually a mirror image of The Merchant of Venice, structurally and even up to a point thematically. Because if you think about it, Don Pedro in Much Ado About Nothing, just as is true of Antonio in The Merchant of Venice, Don Pedro extends himself. He goes above and beyond to help a couple of his young friends to achieve their desires in love. It's Don Pedro who brokers the marriage between Hero and Claudio, and it's also Don Pedro who engineers the plot to bring Benedick and Beatrice together. And by the way, I mean, with the exception of a play that I will leave to the end, Much Ado About Nothing, this is the template, this is the blueprint for every rom-com that followed. Isn't this the formula? Don't we meet two people at the very beginning who claim that they cannot stand the other, and we know that they are destined to be together, and then we just delight in watching the play bring them together. Okay, that's Beatrice and Benedick. Don Pedro, at the end of the play, right? The end of the play. Let me detour for a second. Sorry, I digress. In Act 4, Scene 1 of The Merchant of Venice, that's the trial scene. That's the scene where Antonio is about to have his heart cut out. In Act 4, Scene 1 of Much Ado About Nothing, that's the wedding scene. That's the scene where Hero and Claudio are supposed to be married, but the bad guy, Don John, who's performing kind of the same function as Shylock did in Merchant, he has planted the idea in Claudio's mind and in Don Pedro's mind that Hero has already been unfaithful to Claudio. And he's shown them a flimsy proof. If you ever saw the Kenneth Branagh film of Much Ado About Nothing, he actually puts that scene in the film. It's not supposed to be seen. I mean, we're not supposed to see it. If Shakespeare wanted that scene in the play, to put it in the play. So at the wedding, Claudio and Don Pedro, they shame Hero. I mean, it's horrible what they do to her. And she swoons and she faints, and they think she's dead. And they don't even care because she dishonored them so much, and off they go. Of course, she's not dead. End of play, Act 5, where all the disharmony is being repaired. So at the end of the play, Hero is shown to be alive. She is reunited with Claudio. They're as happy as can be. Beatrice and Benedick, even though they realize that they've kind of been fooled into declaring their love for one another, they're very happy. And then Benedick has a most curious line, which he speaks to Don Pedro. He says, "Prince, thou art sad. Get thee a wife." And everyone goes, ha, 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 ha. Right? But see, here's Shakespeare actually shining a light on this phenomenon. I mean, you wouldn't want to make a non sequitur out of it, I don't think. So Benedict is clearly responding to something that's going on. And when I had strangely enough, I've had the opportunity to play a lot of these odd man out roles. I don't know what the explanation is. But when I played Don Pedro, I took the opportunity to just kind of distance myself from the general, harmonious happiness over there, and I was just kind of doing the 1,000-yard stare, Prince, huh? Thou art sad. Oh, yeah, sorry, you caught me. Because, why would Pedro be sad? Well, just as is the case with Antonio in Merchant, having extended himself so that his young pal could find the love of his life, there goes his pal. Presumably just not going to see my friends as often now, right? Claudio, Benedict, now they're married. It's been the three of them for heaven knows how long. Prince, thou art sad. Let's look at the end of As You Like It. We've talked about the character of Jacques. Did we talk about him? Oh, sorry. Okay, I got my workshop confused with my lecture. So here's Duke Senior out in the forest with his merry men. But there's one guy that's not so merry, Jacques. He's kind of sour. He's kind of a misanthrope. He kind of likes to tell people, what's wrong with the way that they're behaving. But he's kind of endearing, though. The men love having him around. He's the guy who speaks the famous, 7 ages of man speech. All the world's a stage and all the blah, 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 blah. At the end of the play, again, the Forest of Arden is magical. So here's Duke Senior in the Forest of Arden, and now we've got no fewer than 4 couples about to be married. You've got Rosalind and Orlando. We knew they were going to be together. We've got Celia and Oliver. That's interesting. Evil brother Oliver came to the Forest of Arden, and what do you know? Turns out to be a mensch. You've got Sylvius and Phoebe, which is great, because Phoebe just rails on this poor guy. But he gets the girl in the end. And then you've got Touchstone and Audrey, and that's a different kettle of fish entirely. In fact, Jacques says, he blesses their marriage. He says, it's but for 2 months victualed. You're not going to last, you two. While they're celebrating, and all these marriages are about to ensue, a messenger comes into their midst. Let me have audience for a word or two. It's a terrific deus ex machina kind of a guy. And he says, so here's what's happening. Duke Frederick got wind of the fact that you guys were hanging out here in the forest, and he got an army together, and he was on his way here. He marched into the forest intending to put y'all to the sword. But along the way, he encountered an old religious hermit, and he was converted. And he's given over the world, and he says, go in peace, go back and take over as the Duke. And Jacques says, whoa, wait a minute. He says to the messenger, wait, are you saying that Duke Frederick, this bad guy, that he's now become a religious guy? And the messenger confirms, yes. And Jacques says, to him will I. Out of these convertites there is much matter to be heard and learned. And Duke Senior says, no, Jacques, stay. And Jacques says, to see no pastime I. Do you get it? There it is again. So Jacques, while Duke Senior is living rough in the forest with his men, and they're all kind of up against it, they're in extremis, he likes that. He likes hanging around with guys like that. But now to go back to the court and all of that stuff and the manners and the cushy lifestyle, not my thing. I'm going to go hang out with the religious convert. Maybe I can learn something from that guy. but there it is again. And once again, Shakespeare he's not playing hide the ball. He shines a light right on that moment. And we know that it resonates. You know how we know? Because Jaques says, "To see no pastime I. What you'll have," he says to Duke Senior, "I'll stay to know at your abandoned cave." So he goes, "I understand that you and I have some stuff to talk about. I'll wait for you there." Off he goes. He's done. He's out of the play. And the next thing that we hear is Duke Senior saying, "Proceed, proceed. We'll begin these rites as we trust they'll end in true delight." So he has to remind people it's a party. And the only reason he has to do that is because Jaques' departure kind of put a damper on things. What's the theme? What's the thread running through all this? What I believe is that just as Macbeth and Othello, I mean, there are tragedies, and then there are those. By orders of magnitude, these are greater theatrical experiences. I believe the same is true of Shakespearean comedy. And I think that the key to it is he understood that in the course of human affairs, there are winners and losers. So let's not pretend that it's across the board. Let's not say everybody comes out of this singing and dancing. Let's just remind ourselves that although we've got an aggregate positive here, somebody didn't quite get brought along. It's vast. It's a deeper, richer, I think more satisfying worldview. Okay, there's one play that I have left for the end here. And I've saved it for two reasons in particular. Number one is I love this play. That's number one. I just want to talk about it. I think Love's Labour's Lost is one of the great, great comedies. Great. Terribly underrated. Does not get produced often enough. Its comedy credentials, I think, are unassailable. For my money, Love's Labour's Lost contains no fewer than 3 of the funniest scenes that Shakespeare ever wrote. Funniest scenes Shakespeare ever wrote. You've got the scene where, well, let me do a little context here. A little context. Elegant comedic setup in Love's Labour's Lost. We're in the kingdom of Navarre, and the young king is here with his 3 lords, Dumaine, Longueville, and Berowne. And they have all promised to live with him for 3 years and live according to certain guidelines. In the first scene of the play, the king has taken the liberty of drawing up a contract that lays out their responsibilities for the next 3 years. And they are study like nobody's business, right? You only get to sleep 3 hours a night. You're going to be hitting the books nonstop. 3 hours a night, it says that. Fasting. 1 day a week, no food. 6 days a week, 1 meal. 3 years. Number 3, no girls. 3 years. No. So the king signs the contract. He says, fellas, Dumaine walks up there and he says, yes, king, what a great idea. You're the best. Signs his name. Longueville, oh, yeah, boy, I don't know why we took so long to get around to this. He signs. All 3 guys turn to Berowne. And Berowne goes, you've got to be kidding me. What? No. No, I said I would come here and hang out with you for 3 years. This is no. And now they start peer pressuring him. Berowne says, okay, you know what? Okay, I'll sign it, but I guarantee you I will not be the first one to breach the contract. Mark my words. He signs. Now, because it's a comedy, and because this is the comic setup, the ink's not even dry on this document when the messenger comes in and says, oh, the Princess of France and her 3 attendants have just entered the kingdom. What do you suppose is going to happen next? So, of course, the boys meet the girls. They're instantly smitten. Each one, they pair up, right? And so we got three great comic scenes. Scene number one is the scene where the king comes in reading a love poem that he's written to the princess. And he knows he's not supposed to be doing this, but they can't help themselves. They're in love. They're young men in love. He reads his poem. Then he goes, uh-oh, somebody's coming. And he hides. And here comes Dumaine. And he's reading his poem. Then he goes, uh-oh, somebody's coming. And he hides. And here comes Longabill, right? Uh-oh, right? And Baroon is already out there. Baroon was first. So you've got four guys who don't know that the others are there. Well, Baroon knows about all three. The king knows about two. Dumaine only knows about Longabill. And the king steps out because he doesn't know that Baroon is there. And the king steps out and he starts lecturing these guys. What are you doing? And then Baroon enters and he says, now step I forth to whip hypocrisy. And he just blasts them all. But it's a great scene. It's such a classic comic scene. The hiding and the little asides. That scene is usually the end of Act 1 of the play. I mean, for performance purposes, it's usually where your intermission goes. Because after they've all been caught, the king turns to Baroon, and they all know that Baroon is the smartest of them all. They know that he's the cleverest. And they say, Baroon, talk us out of the contract. And Baroon has this amazing speech where he basically argues, it's very legal in its way. He basically argues that natural law trumps the laws of man, and that therefore the contract is inconsequential because we were made to do certain things. So they run off and now they're going to pursue the girls. That's number one. Number two is the scene where, in order to impress the women, and I don't know why they thought this would be impressive, but they dress as Russians. They come in and they pretend to be Russians. Now, I'm telling you, I think that sometimes people hear me talking about Shakespearean comedy and they think that I'm hopelessly highbrow. There is nothing lower on the comic ladder than this scene. And when I directed this play, I had these guys, doing the worst Russian accents you ever heard in your life, right? Yakov Smirnov times 10. And they were wearing, big, tall, woolly caps, and they had long, black ZZ Top-looking beards, and they were doing Kazatsky dances and stuff. It's ridiculous. But that's the funny stuff. The third funny scene in the play is the play within a play. Now, we're familiar in A Midsummer Night's Dream with Pyramus and Thisbe, right? This is even funnier. It's the pageant of the nine worthies. And again, it's an entertainment that the minor characters cobble together to entertain the lords and ladies. And they play, great personages from history, like Hercules as a child in his crib strangling the snake, or, Hector of Troy, right? But of course, like Pyramus and Thisbe, the lords and ladies are heckling them mercilessly, and then they start infighting. It's very funny stuff. The other reason I want to talk about this play, just besides the fact that I just like it, is that if you were an attorney and you were assigned the task of convincing a judge or a jury of my theory that Shakespeare intended the comedy and the not comedy to coexist, this play is Exhibit A. And here's why. I was only in this play once before, in it. And not to put too fine a point on it, I was carrying a spear. Okay, this was the Utah Shakespeare Festival, 1986. I'd gotten better roles in the other two plays, in Midsummer and in Julius Caesar. So this was my light show. So, I'm literally, okay, it happens. There are no small roles. Yes, there are. And that was one of them. At our first company gathering and read-through, the director of the play said to us, "The single greatest moment in Shakespeare is in this play." And we all kind of went, okay, what's he talking about? And he didn't tell us what it was at that moment. We had to discover it, as he took us through the play. So here we are, the pageant of the 9 worthies. And the men and the women are now, they're in harmony, right? I mean, weddings are on the horizon. All 4 couples are solid now, and they're having some entertainment. And there's laughter, and there's mirth and gaiety is cloaking the stage. We reach a comic crescendo to this thing. And if you can imagine, we were performing this thing on the big replica Elizabethan stage at the Utah Shakespearean Festival in Cedar City, if you ever get a chance. And in Shakespeare's stage, there's an inner below and an inner above. Both are used for entrances and exits. The inner above is a balcony. The inner below is on stage level, but it's an entrance-exit. So the 9 worthies reaches this fever pitch of comedy, and we're all laughing. I mean, we're all, even with our spears, stop, you're killing me. And Sandy, our director, contrived to sort of very gradually bring us together into this clump, this knot of laughing bodies. And we were obscuring the inner below. We had masked it from the audience's view. And suddenly, the laughter amongst this clump started to die out. And it parted in the middle. And there, discovered in the inner below, was Marcady, the emissary from France, dressed all in black, holding a torch and wearing a black armband. And I'm telling you, I was standing literally with my back against the facade of the theater. I was looking directly into the audience, and I saw people burst into tears. It would take about that long, because they had to put the pieces together. Oh, that's the French guy, and he's in mourning, and oh my God, her father has died. And I mean, I'm not talking about people reaching for a Kleenex and kind of surreptitiously going, I'm talking about sobs. So that was the moment that our director had been talking about, and he certainly made a believer out of me. But if you know this play, what happens in the aftermath of that event is extraordinary. There's nothing like it in Shakespeare, elsewhere in Shakespeare that I'm aware of. The princess says to her ladies, well, now she's the queen, actually. She says to her ladies, get ready, we have to go home. And the boys say, well, no, don't leave. We just got to this point now, and, well, marry us. Let's, right? And the princess says, you know what? She says to the king, this whole thing it's been fun and games. You guys have been kind of amusing, and we've kind of strung along, but we have something much more important that we have to do right now. And if you are serious in your protestations of love, wait a year. Wait a year and actually live the way that you said you were going to live, and at the end of that time, come back and this will happen. And each of the 4 couples, in turn, has a similar exchange. The woman says to the man, you must wait. You have to wait, because our duty right now is to go home and to be in mourning for the dead king. Last up are Rosaline and Berowne, whom I've always thought were kind of the prototypes for Beatrice and Benedict. This was kind of Shakespeare's first cut at this kind of relationship. And Rosaline says to him, it's a beautiful speech. Any actresses who are in need of a monologue, Rosaline's speech to Berowne is awesome. She basically says, I knew who you were before I ever met you. Your reputation preceded you. And now that I've met you in person, it's true. You are as witty, as funny a person as I've ever encountered, and you waste it. you waste it on nothing. She said, you want to do some good? Then for this next year, you go find the places where the sick and dying live. Make them smile. Make them laugh, right? Turn it to some positive end. And then the last image we have in the play is women. I mean, Don Armado, who's this crazy Spaniard we haven't spoken of yet, but he says, you that way, we this. That's the last image that we have of the play, is the men and women going their separate ways. Now, it's not a total downer. It's not a total, rain cloud, because there is some uplift to it. There is the promise that the boys who have now started to access a maturity that they could not pretend to earlier, maybe they'll pull this off. And maybe, and maybe. We don't know. Shakespeare never wrote the sequel. But that's the way that play ends. Now, I dare any director to make that funny. I defy you. It's an early play. So this blending of comedic and more serious elements will become subtler as Shakespeare goes along. But if ever we needed a clear example of the fact that he wanted both things operating, that's the play. That's the play, because the line of demarcation, the line where one ends and the other begins, will never be that stark again. And that's what I had to say, basically. I mean, that's Shakespearean comedy. I just think, look, am I saying that productions that try to get funny out of everything are doomed to a horrible death? No. You'll get something out of them. You will. You may be able to coax some cheap laughs out of Act 1. Maybe you can nip and tuck in Act 5 to make sure that everybody is part of the general tone of restoration and contentment at the end of the play. I just think that you've left something out. You've left something out. And I think that if you show an audience how various and how diverse these plays can be, that's when you've done your job. You've done your job. You'll get the laughs. 2, 3, and 4. You'll get the laughs. But some serious stuff going on in 1 and 5. Anybody got any questions that I can...
What's the name of that one again?
That's Love's Labor's Lost.
I'd love to see that somewhere.
Me too.
I wish somebody do it in Huntington.
Michael do it, and Michael played Don Armado. That's his role. That's his role.
What are we doing?
Yeah, it's a beauty. It's a beauty. Yes.
Welcome,
Love's Labor's Lost. LLL. Think of it that way.
I'll get in the library and look up some Shakespeare.
There you go.
Do you think that the one reason why people are so impatient and they try to, do you think it's because of the fast-paced society, there's all these distractions? People back then when they went to the plays, that was it. There was no television at home, movies, video games, we're here, or do you think it's something else?
No, I think there's a lot of truth to that. I think that definitely is at play here. I mean, part of it is simply the term comedy. Comedy is a genre term. When you're looking at classical comedies, actually, the funny is not so essential, as is the fact that we've got fractured relationships and people who are pried apart, and then we get the restoration. That's really the process of it, I think what you say is true, but I tell you what, again, I think that's more of a director problem than an audience problem. Because the kind of thing that I'm advocating for at the beginnings of plays, audiences will not find it uninteresting. I mean, it's compelling stuff. Fathers threatening to kill their daughters. It's shocking. It's alarming. I don't think that an audience attends a production of a Shakespeare comedy and after 5 minutes thinks to themselves, I haven't laughed yet. This play is awful. You know, I think that, if you trust your playwright, you trust the way that he structured this thing, I think it'll work. But yeah, I mean, it is different. It is different now. But again, to revisit an earlier point, even if that's what you believed, audiences don't have the attention span. They won't wait through the expository stuff to get to the funny stuff. So therefore, I have to try to, manufacture some laughs right off the bat. You can do it. You can do it. You can show them the old comic tropes, and you'll get people to go, "Oh yeah, that's a funny thing," but you won't get the payoff. You won't get the payoff. You won't get the brilliant insight that Theseus comes with at the end of A Midsummer Night's Dream if you turned him into an idiot in Act 1. And that's true, like, just right across the board. Let these guys have their due. Yeah, go.
Do you have any advice, or this is kind of a broad stroke question, but there are often gestures written in. How do you approach those characters? How do you give them?
Okay, look at that's a great question. That's a great question. How do we deal with fools in Shakespeare? How do we deal with fools? And I'll tell you what, I mean, there are lots and lots of flavors of fool in Shakespeare. Let me start by saying this. If there's a book that you should read, if you have not yet found it, those of you who are participants in the theater, particularly actors, you got to find a book by, God, what the heck is his first name? His last name is Green, and the book is called The Art of Coarse Acting. We know this book? The Art of Coarse Acting, C-O-A-R-S-E. It's hilarious. He's basically writing a book about how to draw attention to yourself if you've got a minor role, right? And it's very funny. But one of the things that this writer also did was he wrote brilliant comedic spoofs of Shakespeare and Chekhov. And his Shakespearean spoof is called All's Well That Ends As You Like It. And in this play, there is a fool, and his name is Testiculo. Testiculo. And the stage direction says, the first time this character enters, the stage direction says, as is true of all Shakespearean fools, nothing Testiculo says is funny. So every time he speaks, everybody else on stage has to erupt in manic laughter, right? So Testiculo, he's supposed to be played as like a completely sour, dour guy, and his first line in the play is, horn, fart, cuckold. And everybody goes, he's funny, he's the fool. Okay. Now, as for Shakespeare's actual fools, different varieties. I've played Touchstone in As You Like It. And, I mean, you ever heard the old phrase, if you can't dazzle them with brilliance, baffle them with, we know how this line ends, BS. Baffle them with BS. That's Touchstone. There are certain things he says in that play that are, I'm sorry, that's just not English. I don't know what you're talking about. But sometimes that's exactly the point. He's baffling people. He has a great scene out in the forest with this forest dweller named William. And Touchstone just runs rings around the guy, So you got that. You've got Feste in Twelfth Night, who is the most mercenary of Shakespeare's fools. Every time Feste, she's... You want more funny out of me? Psh, tip time. And I'll tell you this. I said before that women disguised as men, disguises are impermeable in Shakespeare. That might be the one example. That might be the one exception to the rule. There's a scene in this play, in Twelfth Night, between Feste and Viola, who is in disguise as Cesario. Take a look at that scene and notice how many times Feste calls Cesario Sir. It's a little bit, I mean, you could definitely go that way. And then you've got the fool in Lear. Who is referred to by Goneril in the play as, you're all licensed fool. That's the point. See, the fool in Lear is representative of that kind of fool. Because he's entertaining, he can say anything to anybody. Because that fool is brutal to Lear. He just never tires of reminding Lear, you made a bad decision, old man. Bad. Right? Yeah. So, look, I mean, I think you just have to decide, you know, in the world of your production, is the guy funny? Is he just like, is it word salad? Or is he telling the truth because he's allowed to do so? Touchstone does a little bit of that. There's one part in the play where he's railing on Duke Frederick, and Celia is Duke Frederick's daughter, and she says, you better watch what you say about my dad. And he says, and Touchstone says, the more pity that fools may not speak wisely what wise men do foolishly. Right? All licensed fool. Did that kind of get at some of it?
Yeah. Do you think those are kind of the roles that are so challenging because are you supposed to be the person who's giving the funny? Are you supposed to be the person who's delivering the truth? Are you like just Rubik's cubing that?
Yeah, no, it's tricky. Like I say, I played Touchstone, and I mean, I don't. The scene where he's talking to Rosalind and Celia, and he's talking about pancakes and mustard. I mean, right? He who swore that the mustard was good and the pancakes were not. Now I'll be sworn, right? I don't know. I don't know. It's testicular time. I mean, if everyone laughs, I guess we conclude he was funny. But they're very different. I mean, we got, is it Lavache or LeFew in All's Well? Yeah, yeah, they're tricky. Yes. Yes. Yeah, Twelfth Night is noteworthy because we have not one, but two odd men out, right? Now, Malvolio, yeah, he's interesting. You know what happens to him. That's a practical joke gone wrong. That's a practical joke that just goes on way, 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 way too long, and Toby even says so. Toby even says, I wish we were done with this business. But see, Toby and Mariah, they're willing to, to have done with it. Feste really hates Malvolio. So it's Feste that visits Malvolio in prison, pretending to be Sir Topus the curate, and he further messes with the guy's mind. Now, I've seen productions that go, I mean, it's a risk, but I've seen this. I've seen Malvolio enter at the end of the play, where he says to the Lady Olivia, why did you do that to me? Why did you write me that letter that started this whole business? And I've seen him brought on stage, I mean, bloodied, bruised and beaten. Maybe a bit much. Imprisoned because he was a madman. That's fair dues for the time. And Feste gets right up in his face, right? Why, some are born great, some achieve greatness, and some have greatness thrust on them. I was one, sir, in this interlude, one Sir Topus, sir. And he says, and Feste concludes his speech, he's right up in Malvolio's grill, he concludes this by saying, and thus the whirligig of time brings in his revenges. And what does Malvolio say? His last line in the play, I'll be revenged on the whole pack of you. Which kind of hangs there for a moment until Orsino says to Fabian, go chase that guy down and try to calm him down. That's not good. That's not good. I actually saw one production where Malvolio's last line came out over the speakers. He had already left the stage. Came out over the speakers like with reverb and I mean it was kind of awesome. It was like, oh my gosh, it's like the servant class is about to go, Spartacus on these guys. But not only Malvolio in that play, Sir Andrew just gets used by Toby. Toby's been bilking him out of, his money for weeks and months, promising him that he can broker a love match between Andrew and Olivia. So at the end of the play, Toby, who got, beaten up by Sebastian, thinking that it was actually, Cesario Viola, and Andrew comes to Toby and he goes, I'll help you, Sir Toby, because we'll be dressed together. And Toby says, you'll help? You, an asshead and a knave, a gull? So Andrew is like publicly humiliated in that moment. Everybody knows now that, oh God, Toby just abused that guy. And Andrew presumably, slinks off. So we got a couple in that play. Yeah. Yeah, that's right. Antonio, yeah.
And all Antonio wanted to do was help his buddy, and he got thrown in prison and everything else.
That's right.
That's the best.
Yeah. Boy, that's good. That's good. Yeah, look, that stuff's there. You don't have to contrive it. Playwright gave it to you. I just feel as though, and if you attended the verse scansion workshop, you already heard me address this. It's like, let's let the man have his say. Shakespeare, I don't think there's any shame in acknowledging that he was better at what he did than we are at what we do. It's okay. It's okay. He's a good guy to work for. Let him have his say. And I think that this is what he's trying to say in the comedies. Generally, my long ago producer, it's funny, thinking about that story, the story that I began this talk with, thinking about that story, I realized I hadn't thought about her in a long, long time. I looked her up, and she's passed, so, may she rest in peace. But, she was part right. She was part right. Generally speaking, we get happy endings. But there's something else going on. There's something else. Even Taming of the Shrew. Taming of the Shrew and The Merchant of Venice are the two minefields. These are the plays that people don't want to do, right? Because Taming of the Shrew nowadays gets turned into a treatise on spousal abuse, which it's like, how did you come up with that? How did you come up with a genre of play that Shakespeare never wrote, right? That play actually works as a romantic comedy. It actually does. And at the end of the play, it's beautiful because Kate and Petruchio have been, like this through the entire play, and we've got two other married couples on stage. We've got Hortensio and the widow, and we've got Lucentio and Portia's sister Bianca. And we've been prepped throughout the play to believe that those were the appropriate couples. But at the end of the play, after the little test of loyalty, as that curtain is going down, only one couple is heading for the bedroom, and that's Kate and Petruchio. And the other two couples, when I direct this show, if I ever direct this show, as the lights go down, these two couples are going to be looking at each other like, I think I might have made a bad decision here. That's what I got for you.
How did you wind up ending Merchant of Venice after the producer objected?
I think that we opened the play as she liked it, and I think we restored our preferred ending at some point when we were out in the hinterlands. I'm pretty sure that's how it went down. Yeah. They never came and checked on us once we were in the bus and on the road.